The humid Lagos night pressed down on her, thick with the scent of diesel fumes and fried plantain. Amara had just finished packing up her stall at the sprawling Balaga market, the echo of the day's chaos finally fading into the hum of 1,000 generators. Her wrapper was tied tight around her waist, her worn slippers slapping softly against the cracked pavement. It was past 11. The journey home to her small room in Ajagunal was a river she had to cross every night, fraught with unseen currents. She thought of the 7 winding streets, the 2 unlit footbridges, and the final narrow path between towering, rusted zinc fences. Tonight, the air felt different, heavy with a watchfulness that prickled her skin. A scuttling sound in the shadows, then the distinct, rhythmic slap of footsteps that were not her own. "God be with me," she whispered, her heart beginning to pound a frantic drum against her ribs. She quickened her pace, but the steps behind her matched her tempo, growing closer, more deliberate. They were a predator's steps, patient and hungry. Fear, cold and sharp, coiled in her belly. She clutched the worn strap of her bag, her fingers fumbling for the small Bible she always carried. Before she could grasp it, a hand clamped around her arm like a steel manacle. A scream tore from her throat, but it was swallowed by the city's din. The man's grip was iron, his voice a low, urgent command that cut through her terror. "Walk, faster, and do not look back." Her breath hitched, her mind racing. This was it. This was how stories of missing girls began. The man was a silhouette, his face hidden in the gloom, but she could feel the coiled power in his frame. He was not nervous. He was focused, like a hunter who had cornered his prey. "Please, Oga, beg," she pleaded, her voice a fractured whisper. "I don't have anything." He didn't answer, simply propelled her forward, his long strides forcing her into a stumbling run. Every instinct screamed for her to fight, to run, but his hold was not brutal. It was resolute. He wasn't dragging her into the shadows. He was pulling her through them. Why? The question hammered in her head, a counterpoint to the terror. Then a sudden, sharp clang from the darkness they had just passed, the sound of a dropped cutlass, followed by a hissed curse in the night. Amara's blood ran cold. The man beside her tensed, his grip tightening for a second. "Keep moving," he gritted out. A flicker of motion behind them, another shadow detaching from the deep darkness and melting away down a side street. Amara gasped, finally understanding. The fear that had been strangling her shifted its target. It was no longer a fear of the man holding her arm, but a terrifying, heart-stopping fear of what would have happened if he hadn't. He was not a predator. He was a shield. He led her through 2 more turns until the dim glow of a main road offered a fragile sanctuary. There, under the sputtering light of a street lamp, he finally released her. Amara staggered back, clutching her wrist, her chest heaving. She stared at the stranger, a tall figure still shrouded in shadows, his simple kaftan doing little to hide his commanding presence. "What? Who was that?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling. He remained silent. "Was he following me?" she pressed, desperate for an answer. His response, when it came, was low and chillingly calm. "For 3 nights. He has been watching you." Amara's mouth went dry. "How do you know?" she began, but he interrupted with a look that was not unkind, but heavy with a weary authority. "Because I have been watching him." The street seemed to spin beneath her. "You were watching me too?" she accused, a fresh wave of fear mixing with confusion. "Who are you?" His shoulders seemed to slump. "I want nothing from you," he said, his voice laced with a profound sadness. "Just be more careful. Some shadows are deeper than they appear." And with that, he turned and melted back into the night, leaving Amara standing alone, the city's noise rushing back in to fill the void he left behind. She reported it, of course. At the local police post, an officer listened with half an ear, typing slowly on an ancient typewriter. "No witnesses, you say? No real description?" he asked, his tone bored. "My sister, this is Lagos. Just thank your God you are safe and don't walk alone at night." At the market, her friend Funk was less dismissive but equally unnerving. "Amara, be careful, this kind of mysterious savior. Maybe he is the real danger." A ghost cannot save you from a demon. The words echoed in her mind, planting seeds of doubt. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling of his hand on her arm, not cruel, but protective. She started seeing him again, a phantom at the edge of her vision, a tall figure leaning against a wall across the street, a silhouette at the far end of the market at closing time. He never approached, just watched. One evening, her frustration and fear boiled over. She saw him standing near a deserted bus stop and marched directly toward him, her heart hammering. "You," she called out. "Why do you keep following me? Are you some kind of guardian angel? Or are you the one I should truly fear?" He finally turned to face her fully, and in the dim light, she saw the profound sorrow etched into his features. His eyes were not menacing. They were hollow, haunted by a grief so deep it seemed to suck the air out of the space between them. His strength seemed to desert him, and he sank onto the nearby bench. "I'm not a hero," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm a terrible brother." The anger drained from Amara, replaced by a wave of unexpected compassion. She saw past the mystery, past the fear, and saw only a man drowning in his own pain. Wordlessly, she sat down on the bench beside him, leaving a small space between them. In the shared silence, under the hum of the Lagos night, two broken souls found a fragile, unspoken connection. They began to walk together, not by plan, but by a quiet, mutual understanding. Their silent journeys became a ritual. He would appear as she locked up her stall, and they would walk the familiar, treacherous path to her neighborhood, the silence between them no longer heavy with fear, but filled with a strange comfort. He never spoke of his life, and she never asked. Instead, he would point out a woman selling roasted corn late into the night, and buy all she had left, pressing the money into her hands. Amara, in turn, would share the food she had with the street children who slept near the bridge. One rainy evening, huddled under the awning of a closed shop, he finally spoke. Her name was Neka, he said, his voice so low it was almost lost in the drumming of the rain. "My younger sister. She was 16-inch. He described a vibrant, laughing girl who loved high-life music and dreamed of becoming a doctor. One night, she was walking home from a church vigil, a journey of only a few streets. She was attacked. People heard her screams, he said, his jaw tightening into a knot of agony. They heard her, and they bolted their doors. They turned up their radios. I was supposed to pick her up, he whispered, his voice breaking. But I was at a party, some useless high society event. I was celebrating a business deal. I didn't even check my phone. The guilt was a physical thing, a crushing weight that she could feel pressing down on him. Amara felt tears well in her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said softly. She reached out, her fingers gently touching his wrist, reversing their first encounter. "You don't have to carry this alone. You cannot save the whole world for the first time." A faint, fleeting smile touched his lips, a flicker of light in his deep-set, sorrowful eyes. He did not pull away. The feeling of being watched returned, sharper this time. "He is back," Kenechukwu said one evening, his eyes scanning the crowded street with a predator's focus. "He has grown bolder." A plan was formed, born of desperation and a shared refusal to live in fear. Amara would walk her usual route, a lone light in the darkness. Kenechukwu, whose name she had finally learned, would follow, a shadow hunting a shadow. That night, the air in the narrow path was electric with dread. Amara's hands trembled, but her steps were steady. Then she heard it, a rustle, a swift movement. A figure lunged from the darkness, a glint of metal in his hand. But Kenechukwu was faster, a blur of motion intercepting the attacker. A brutal struggle erupted. Amara screamed as the man's knife flashed, and she heard a sickening, wet sound. Kenechukwu staggered back, a dark stain spreading rapidly across his kaftan. "No!" Amara shrieked, her fear replaced by a ferocious courage. She launched herself at the attacker, clawing and biting, giving Kenechukwu a precious second to fight back just as the wail of sirens pierced the night. The attacker was tackled and subdued by the police who, alerted by Keen's anonymous tip, had been waiting nearby. Amara fell to her knees beside Kenechukwu, pressing her hands to his side, her tears mixing with his blood. "Stay with me," she sobbed. "Please, Keen, stay with me." In the chaotic emergency room, a nurse with a clipboard approached her. "We need his full name for the records." Amara, covered in his blood, could only shake her head. "His name is Kenechukwu," a senior doctor overheard, glancing at the patient being wheeled into surgery. "Wait," the doctor said, his eyes widening. That's Kenechukwu, Enin." The name hung in the air, electric and unbelievable. Kenechukwu Enin, the reclusive billionaire owner of Enin Global, one of the most powerful and untouchable men in West Africa. A man whose face was never seen, but whose influence was everywhere. And he had been bleeding out in a Lagos slum to save her, a market girl. Suddenly, a well-dressed, severe-looking man, flanked by security, stormed toward her. "Who are you?" he demanded, his eyes cold. "I am Chidi, his cousin. What have you done to him?" He tried to have her thrown out, but the doctor intervened, naming her as the one who brought him in. For 3 days, she refused to leave the hospital, sitting in a plastic chair outside the intensive care unit. Chidi and other family members sneered at her, accusing her of being a gold digger, a witch who had ensnared him. They offered her money to disappear. She refused, praying with a fervor that shook her to her core. The doctors said his chances were slim. "It is in God's hands now," they told her. On the 3rd night, when all seemed lost, they allowed her to sit by his bedside. Chidi stood in the doorway, a smirk on his face, already planning his takeover of the empire. Amara ignored him. She took Kenechukwu's limp hand, leaned close, and began to sing. It was an old Igbo hymn, a song of hope her mother used to sing, her voice soft but clear, filling the sterile room with a desperate, beautiful faith. She sang of mercy and miracles, tears streaming down her face. As the final note faded, his fingers twitched in hers. His eyelids fluttered. Chidi gasped from the doorway. Amara's heart stopped. "Keen," she whispered. He turned his head slowly, his gaze finding hers. "Amara," he rasped, his voice a ghost of itself. "Are you safe?" In that moment, the machines around them seemed to sing a chorus of recovery. The miracle was not in the beeping monitors, but in the eyes of the man who, in his darkest hour, thought only of her. He lifted his hand to her face and whispered, "You did not leave." She shook her head, her tears now tears of joy. "Never." He pulled her gently closer and kissed her, a promise sealed in a room that had, moments before, held only despair. Months melted into a new season, one filled with a light Amara had only ever prayed for. The shadows of her past were vanquished, replaced by the steady warmth of Kenechukwu's love. She was no longer just a market girl. She became the heart of his world. She didn't move into his Ikoyi mansion. Instead, he helped her start a small business, and together they established the NECA Foundation, a sanctuary for vulnerable young women in Lagos. His family's hostility faded into grudging respect as they witnessed the profound change in him. The haunted recluse was gone, replaced by a man who smiled freely, who found joy in service, who saw the world not through the lens of his grief, but through the hope in Amara's eyes. One evening, as the sun set over the Lagos lagoon, casting a golden glow on the water, he took her to the small, quiet church where his sister had last prayed. There, with no audience but God, he knelt before her. "I found you in the darkest night of my life, Amara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you were the dawn. You sang light back into my soul. Will you be my light always?" Her yes was a whisper and a prayer answered. Their wedding was not a society spectacle splashed across magazines. It was a celebration of life, held in the garden of the foundation, under a canopy of bougainvillea. The guests were a tapestry of their two worlds. Market women and vibrant rappers laughing alongside corporate executives in crisp suits. Street children they had helped dancing with members of his board. Amara, radiant in a simple, elegant gown, walked down an aisle lined with the very girls whose lives their love had saved. As Kenechukwu slid the ring on her finger, he leaned in and whispered, his promise echoing the vow she had made to him. From this day forward, we walked together. No more shadows. They turned to face their community, hand in hand, no longer two broken souls, but one complete story of healing and hope. Their love, born in darkness and sealed by a miracle, was now a beacon, a testament that even in the most dangerous corners of the world, faith could move mountains and love could, indeed, conquer all. For those whose hearts are moved by tales of redemption and the quiet power of the human spirit, know that such stories are all around us. They are the proof that love finds its way, that heroes emerge from the shadows, and that every soul, no matter how lost, can be stirred back to life.